In this video, I want to address a very common and I think very dangerous misunderstanding, which is people conflating the concept of being able to read sheet music with music theory. These two things could not be more different, and in my opinion, their importance to you as a songwriter also couldn't be more different. Let's talk about it. So in an effort to try to make this as clear as possible, I'm going to actually do a little comparison here. And to me, sheet music is sort of the same idea as learning the Screenplay format. So Screenplay format is just a basic structure and a syntax in order to communicate to someone else how to execute the art you've created. So for example, if you want to write a script for somebody else to be able to make into a funny YouTube skit, and you create it in Screenplay format, that is just an accepted way to be able to efficiently communicate to that person exactly what to do with camera angles and who's talking when and when the scene changes, which is not something that's useless, but it's mostly geared towards communicating to other people how to execute the art that you made. And you may say, rightfully in my opinion, that you are more than capable of making a YouTube video that is super funny and engaging without knowing anything about how to write in Screenplay format, even though you could write it in Screenplay format as a way to communicate to other people how exactly they are supposed to execute that skit. And you would be totally right. In fact, if I were to make YouTube skits, I don't know that I would even bother to learn how to do Screenplay formatting because I don't know that it's worth my time. But in order to have a good, funny YouTube skit, you do need to be able to know how to execute humor. You need to be able to know how to tell a joke, how to say something in a funny way. You probably need to understand when to do maybe a camera zoom to emphasize something that's funny. And you need to, in general, be able to write an interesting dialogue that will keep people engaged. Now that is the same as understanding music theory, because music theory is just the study of the practices and the possibilities of music. So it's sort of like learning how to have a story structure. It's understanding the hero's journey or understanding how to write dialogue that's engaging. That is of course important when you're writing maybe a YouTube skit or maybe a full movie or a short film. It's super important to know how to actually write a script when it comes to how dialogue should work. Maybe you don't need to know the exact syntax and how to make it in Screenplay format, but of course it's important to understand how dialogue should work, how to make sure that it's not clunky. And music theory is very much that kind of knowledge. Let me give you a little example of what understanding music theory can do for you as you're sitting writing a song. So if you're sitting and writing a song, you may just be at, say, a piano and just playing different notes, and a lot of them don't really sound very good together, and you don't really understand why. You're just kind of playing things until you hopefully eventually land on something that sounds kind of decent. But if you understand music theory, just the very, very basics, you can sit at a piano instead and say, you know what, let's start with E major. And I know that in E major, in order to have the sound of E major that I want, which is generally going to be a brighter sound because I know that major is generally one of the brightest types of keys to have. Now I could go Lydian mode and make it even brighter, or if I want something really dark, I could go with the Phrygian mode. And understanding music theory is understanding that if I want that really dark piece of music that's even darker than a minor key, that maybe I want to use the Phrygian mode. But not only that, but it's understanding exactly how to get the Phrygian mode. So for example, I could take A minor and then say, you know what, I don't want it to just be A minor, I want it to be even darker. So how do I make it A Phrygian instead? Well, I understand, because I know basic music theory, that Phrygian mode is basically just a minor key, but then you flat the second. So A minor is just all of the white keys, all of the notes that aren't sharps or flats. It's A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So if I just flat the second in order to make it Phrygian, then I would have A, B flat, and then all the other notes that I just said. But back to E major, keeping it basic, I know that I have the notes E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, and D sharp. So I know when I'm sitting at the piano to only play those notes in order to have a sound that sounds like E major. And then I also know that the main chords I'm going to have, especially when I'm looking for major chords to play, are going to be my E major chord, which is my 1 chord, as well as my A major chord, which is my 4 chord, and my B major chord, which is going to be my 5 chord. I also know that each of those sort of have a different job and a different sound in the context of a key. In the context of E major, a B major chord has the same job as a G major chord has in the context of C major, because they are both major 5 chords in the context of their respective keys. So everything I just said might sound like totally Spanish to you, but that's really what music theory is. It's what allows me to sit at a piano and be like, you know what, I'm going to write in C Phrygian today. And then I know the notes that I have to play, and I know the different chords that I have, and I can just play in the Phrygian mode, which I know has a certain sound because I know the general sound of the Phrygian mode, which is a very dark sound and sort of sounds a little exotic too. It's really awesome. If you're gonna write some dark rock music, use Phrygian mode. Look it up. But anyway, that's not the point here. The idea is that instead of just happening upon different sounds by pure luck, I can actually be actively seeking different sounds because I know the basics of music theory. I know what a B major chord is generally going to sound like in the context of E major. I'm going to know that, generally speaking, if I want kind of a minor sounding key, but I don't want to go full minor, that I can actually go with the Dorian mode, and it's going to sound just a little bit brighter than a minor key. Therefore, if I want a song that's on the darker side, but I think, minor just sounds too dark, it sounds too sad, then I know, okay, let's try Dorian instead. These are the sort of things that music theory gets you. So if you're interested in learning the real basics of music theory that I think is absolutely imperative to songwriting, be sure to check out my free guide. It talks about the 4 pillars of music theory that I think every songwriter really needs to know. And those 4 pillars are intervals, which is sort of at the basis of the rest of music theory, and then keys, chords, and chord progressions. If you understand those 4 things, that will get you 90% of the way to being a much more efficient and better songwriter. So this guide will teach you the things that go into what I said earlier when I said that I know all the notes I have in the context of E major, and I also know all the different chords that I'm going to have in the context of E major. That way I can sit down, say I'm going to write a song in E major, and know what chords I have as well as what notes I have, which the chords obviously help with the harmony, whether that be guitar chords that you're strumming or piano parts that you're writing that's utilizing chords, and your melody, which you're probably singing with your voice, will be with the notes that you know you have. So if you understand those 4 pillars, that's going to get you like 90% of the way. I think it's also helpful to dive deeper and learn modes and learn other different types of chords like sus chords and add chords. And I teach all of that on this channel and in my podcast. So if you're interested, be sure to check out those things as well. But if you want just to start with the basics, the main stuff that will get you 90% of the way there as far as becoming a more efficient writer of music, be sure to check out this free guide. Totally free. Link in the description down below. And for the record, if you are somebody that thought that being able to read sheet music and knowing music theory were one and the same, if that's why you thought music theory is purely academic knowledge that's worthless, you know what? If we're talking about just sheet music, I kind of agree. In fact, I used to be pretty good at reading sheet music because I was a classically trained pianist. And frankly, when you're trying to read piano sheet music, you're often having to read 5 notes at once. And I was never that great at it, but I did have to learn it and become pretty good at it. But by the time high school came around, most of my sheet music reading was just for vocals, which is 1 note at a time. So I wasn't quite as good at reading music anymore because I really wasn't doing too much piano or guitar sheet music reading anymore. And then by the time I got out of college, I was now at the point where I basically never had to read music, basically ever. And honestly, I've never once written a song by actually physically writing it in sheet music form. I've never done that. It always starts with improvisation. But I always use my music theory knowledge when I'm writing a song. Always, always, always. I always sit at a piano and start with, you know what, let's do D major today. Or, you know what, I want to write something in Phrygian today. Let's do B Phrygian. I always start with those things, and I always utilize my knowledge of the different chords I have within the key and what each of their jobs are. So I'm constantly using music theory knowledge, but I basically never use sheet music reading knowledge. In fact, if you don't know how to read sheet music and you're worried about learning it when it comes to songwriting, don't. Just ignore it. Don't do it. But when it comes to music theory, it definitely is something that you should take the time to learn. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. I'll talk to you in the next one.